Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is Tuesday, February 17th, 2026. And today we're doing something a little different.
Yeah, a little.
Usually when we sit down at these microphones, we have a book, maybe a long-form article from The Atlantic or white paper from a think tank. We pick it apart, we find the nuggets, move on.
Pretty straightforward.
Today, however, the table is, and I'm not exaggerating, literally groaning under the weight of something else entirely.
It is a beast of a document. I think I threw my back out lifting it this morning.
We're looking at the February 2026 dispatch of Mehta's market intelligence. And for anyone who hasn't encountered Mehta's work before, this is not your standard Wall Street newsletter.
No, not at all.
It isn't just buy Apple, sell Tesla. It
Right.
feels more like, honestly, it feels like an intelligence agency dossier that accidentally got leaked to a hedge fund.
That is exactly the vibe. It's incredibly multidisciplinary. We call it forensic analysis for a reason.
Forensic, how so?
Because it doesn't just look at, stock price charts or PE ratios. It looks at the physics of manufacturing, the biology of gene editing, geopolitical supply chains, obscure legal rulings in Puerto Rico. It's trying to find the signal in a massive, massive amount of noise.
Invisible narratives. That was the phrase that really jumped out at me in the preamble.
That's the whole thesis.
The idea is that by the time you read it on the front page of the Wall Street Journal or you see it on CNBC, the money has already been made or lost. The narrative is visible. Mehta's goal is to find the invisible ones.
Exactly. If you're reacting to the headline, you are the liquidity for someone else who got out 3 weeks ago. Our mission today is to get you upstream of that headline.
To find the currents before they become waves.
That's the idea.
And the connections we're going to make today are, frankly, wild. I mean, we're living through this, and on one page, we have a deep dive into the Federal Reserve's monetary policy, and then, 3 pages later, we're talking about the biology of bone density, and then somehow we're talking about Japanese toilets.
It sounds chaotic, I know, but it's the plumbing of the AI revolution, quite literally in that case.
Literally. We are going to explain, and I really can't wait for this part, why a high-tech toilet seat is actually a better bet on artificial intelligence than a lot of the software companies everyone is talking about.
It's my favorite part of the whole report.
We're also going to look at something called weaponized reputation, which sounds absolutely terrifying if you're a CEO.
It is. It's this major shift from reputation being just, a PR problem to it being an existential financial risk. It can kill a stock.
And finally, we're going to get into the lab. We've got a whole section on what the report calls killer experiments, like turning RNA into DNA barcodes to potentially cure Alzheimer's.
And that's the deep science. That's the second-order thinking, moving past the headline to the actual mechanics underneath everything.
Okay, let's unpack this beast. Let's start with the big picture, the macro synthesis. The report opens with a directive that feels almost dangerous given the current context. It just says, in big, bold letters, fade the dollar.
Right. And to understand why that's so bold, you really have to look at the date. It's early 2026. The economic picture right now is, let's just call it confusing.
Confusing is a massive understatement. The report says nominal GDP is tracking above 7%.
Which is a scorching hot number, just scorching.
Let's just make sure everyone's on the same page. Nominal GDP is the raw economic growth before you adjust for inflation, right?
Correct. It's the actual dollar value of everything produced in the economy. When you see a number like 7% for nominal GDP, that's boom time stuff. Yeah. That is an economy running on jet fuel.
Okay, so here is the paradox. This is what I don't get. If the economy is booming at 7%, the textbook Economics 101 says the Federal Reserve should be hiking interest rates.
Without a doubt.
They should be slamming on the brakes to stop the engine from overheating and causing hyperinflation.
That is the classic playbook. For decades, economy hot, raise rates, make money more expensive to cool things down. Economy cold, you cut rates. Make money cheap to stimulate growth.
But that's not what's happening at all.
No, and that is the trap this report is identifying. Despite the 7% growth, the consensus and even the Fed's own signaling is pointing toward rate cuts.
So we have a hot economy, but they want to make money cheaper. It feels unprecedented.
It is unprecedented in modern history, and the report calls it the unprecedented Fed trap. But here's where it gets really interesting. The source argues this isn't a mistake.
They're not just getting it wrong.
Exactly. It's not that the Fed is misreading the data or that they're stupid. It's that this is an official, calculated sanctioning of a weak dollar regime.
A weak dollar regime. So they want the dollar to go down in value.
They want it to go down. They are actively choosing to let the dollar fade.
Why? I mean, if the economy is strong, why would we want to debase your own currency?
2 words: deglobalization.
The big structural shift we've been talking about for a couple of years.
Think about it. We are living in a world where supply chains are breaking up and reforming. For 30 years, we basically exported our inflation to China.
We bought cheap goods, cheap TVs, cheap everything.
Exactly. That era is over. Things are becoming more expensive to make and to ship because we're bringing factories back home or friend-shoring them to allies. That is inflationary by its very nature.
So inflation is sticky because of the physical structure of the world, not just because people are, I don't know, buying too many Pelotons.
Correct. And the report argues that this AI-driven productivity narrative, the idea that robots and AI are going to make everything super cheap, it isn't powerful enough to fight that structural inflation. Not yet, anyway.
So the Fed is stuck.
They're completely stuck. If they hike rates to fight this structural inflation, they blow up the interest payments on the massive U.S. national debt.
Right. They can't afford the payments on their own credit card if the interest rate goes up too high.
Bingo. So the only policy choice left is something called financial repression. You keep interest rates artificially low relative to growth, and you devalue the currency. It makes your exports cheaper, and crucially, it helps you pay back your enormous debt with cheaper dollars down the road.
Wow. So the whole strong dollar policy, the mantra we've heard from every Treasury Secretary for like 30 years, is that essentially dead.
According to this intelligence, yes. The pretense is over. And you don't even have to take their word for it. Just look at the evidence provided in the report.
What's the data say?
The DXY, that's the dollar index, it measures the dollar against a basket of other currencies. It's down about 10% over the past year, and fund managers. The report says they are the most bearish on the dollar they have been in a decade.
So the smart money already sees the writing on the wall.
The smart money is already moving.
Okay, so if I'm a listener and I'm holding a bunch of U.S. dollars or, U.S.-centric stocks, this sounds bad, or at least risky. The report has a section called the trade. So how do we pivot?
Well, though, logic is simple. If the dollar is fading, you have to ask yourself, where does the money go? It has to go somewhere.
Right.
It flows away from the crowded trades. And right now, what is the most crowded trade on the entire planet?
Big U.S. tech stocks. The Magnificent Seven.
Exactly. So the report suggests a rotation. You start to get out of those crowded, expensive U.S. names, and you look at non-U.S. equities.
Okay, but why specifically non-U.S.? Is it just because they're not here?
It's 2 main reasons: value and yield. First, they are just massively under-owned. Everyone has been piling into NVIDIA and Microsoft and Apple for 5 years. Almost nobody has been buying, say, European industrials or certain emerging markets, so they are cheap on a relative basis.
Makes sense.
But the killer stat in the report is about the dividend yield. It notes that a basket of international value stocks are paying double, literally double the dividend yield of the MSCI US index.
Okay, let me get this straight. If my dollars are going to be worth less in the future, I want an asset that pays me cash now.
Yes, that's part of it.
And I want that asset to be priced in a different currency, like the euro or the yen, that might actually go up against the dollar.
Precisely. It's a potential double win. You get the higher yield, and you could get currency appreciation on top of that. It's basically a currency and yield arbitrage play.
Okay. And there's a really specific mention here of commodities. That makes sense on the surface, right?
Sure.
If the dollar gets weaker, commodities that are priced in dollars usually go up. But it specifically points to Canadian oil producers.
Yes. This is a brilliant little bit of dot connecting, a perfect example of the forensic work in this report.
So why Canada? Why not, Texas or Saudi Arabia?
It's a triangulation of the entire thesis. The report mentions that Canadian oil producers, companies like Canadian Natural Resources or Suncor, they are pivoting their supply chains heavily towards Asia.
Right. I've heard about the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion.
That's a huge part of this. It lets them ship oil directly to the Pacific. So they're planning to send a lot more of their oil to China and India instead of just south to the U.S.
Okay.
Now, combine that logistical fact with the currency view. If the U.S. dollar weakens, what happens to the purchasing power of Asian currencies, like the yuan or the rupee?
They get stronger relative to the dollar.
Exactly. So Asian buyers suddenly find that their money buys them more oil, their purchasing power goes up, so what do? They buy more. And the Canadian producers are positioning themselves to sell directly into that rising purchasing power.
So it's a second-order trade. You aren't just betting on the price of oil going up. You are betting on the currency flows behind the oil transaction.
That is the level of forensic detail I love in this report. It's not just oil goes up, it's who is buying the oil, with what currency, and through which pipeline.
So the macro takeaway here is crystal clear. Fade the dollar, look at international stocks for yield, look at commodities that sell to Asia. That sets the stage perfectly.
Now, I want to pivot to something that feels, well, it feels a lot bubblier.
AI bubble.
Section 2, AI's second derivative. And the title is Short the Hype, Long the Plumbing.
I love this section. It's just so grounding in a moment of, total mania.
It starts with this story that is both funny and kind of terrifying. It's about these billboards on Route 101 in San Francisco.
The famous Route 101, the main artery of Silicon Valley. And these aren't just regular ads for, soda or car insurance. The report calls them insider-only billboards. They are specifically targeting venture capitalists with these cryptic inside joke messages.
Right. The report mentions a startup called Vibe that put up billboards referencing like Mark Andreessen's forehead or obscure jokes about Jensen Huang's leather jacket.
Jensen's leather jacket? I mean, come on.
It's pure tribal signaling. And the analysis in the report is that this is a classic, undeniable signal of peak froth.
Peak froth.
Think about it. When you are spending millions of dollars on outdoor advertising, not to sell a product to an actual customer, but to signal your cultural fluency to a tiny, tiny group of billionaires driving their Teslas.
It's a mania. It's just vanity at that point.
It is speculative mania. The report calls it a symptom, not a sign of a durable investment theme. It's the late stage of the party when things get weird. And we are already seeing the hangover start. The report notes M&A deals are getting scuppered because of AI fears. European software stocks are taking big hits.
So the easy money in AI, just buying the big chip designers, buying the big software names, that trade is getting very crowded and very risky.
It's what you'd call asymmetric risk to the downside. If everything isn't absolutely perfect for those companies, those stocks could crash.
So where's the opportunity then? The report says long the plumbing.
Correct. Skip the hype. By the obscure, high-margin, boring components that actually make all the hype possible. It's the picks and shovels for the picks and shovels.
And this brings us to the toilet.
Toto,
the Japanese company that's famous for the washlet.
Yeah.
The heated seat, the bidet functions, all of that.
Yeah.
I have to be honest, when I saw this in the report, I thought it was a joke. How on earth is Toto an AI play?
This is a classic example of looking deeper, of looking at the plumbing. Yes, Toto makes high-end toilets, but to make a really, really good toilet, one that is perfectly smooth, stain-resistant, incredibly durable, you have to be an absolute master of advanced ceramics.
Ceramics, okay. I'm with you so far.
And it turns out Toto dominates the global market for a very specific, very critical component called high-tech ceramic electrostatic chucks.
Electrostatic chucks. Okay, you have to really break this down for us. What is a chuck, and why on earth does AI need it?
Okay, so imagine you are in a factory manufacturing a microchip, specifically a NAND memory chip. These are the chips that store massive amounts of data, and AI data centers need mountains and mountains of them.
Got it. Memory chips.
To make these chips, you start with a very thin, very fragile silicon wafer, and you have to etch these incredibly microscopic patterns onto it using plasma and all sorts of corrosive chemicals. Now, during this whole process, that wafer cannot move, not even a nanometer. If it wiggles at all, the entire chip is ruined.
So you need some way to hold it perfectly still.
Right. But you can't use a physical clamp, like a little robot hand.
Why not?
A clamp would put pressure on the edges and crush the wafer. It would warp the delicate silicon. Plus, the clamp itself would get in the way of the etching tools that need to access the whole surface.
So how do you hold it? It sounds impossible.
You use an electrostatic chuck. It uses static electricity, basically the exact same force that makes a balloon stick to your hair after you rub it, to grip the wafer from the bottom. It holds it perfectly flat and perfectly still without touching the top or the edges at all.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like a sci-fi magnet for silicon. That's cool.
It is cool. But here is the catch. The environment inside that etching chamber is absolutely hellish. It's incredibly hot, and the chemicals used for the etching process are extremely corrosive. If you used a metal chuck, it would melt or corrode almost instantly. If you used a plastic one, it would just disintegrate.
You need something basically invincible.
You need advanced ceramics, a very specific kind of material that conducts electricity just enough to create the static charge, but is also chemically inert and can withstand insane temperatures. And who is the world master of this kind of ceramic technology?
Toto, the toilet company.
The toilet company.
So let's trace the chain. AI needs massive amounts of memory. Memory chips need to be manufactured. The manufacturing process needs these ceramic chucks, and Toto makes the best chucks.
That is the ataraxis framework the report mentions. Ataraxis is a Greek word. It means a state of serene calmness. It's about connecting the chaotic, noisy software hype to the calm, physical hardware reality. New AI factories are being built all over the world, and they all need these specific high-margin ceramics.
And nobody, absolutely nobody, thinks of Toto as a tech stock.
Exactly. It's completely undervalued and overlooked by the market. People just see toilet company and they move on. But the report notes that an activist fund is already initiating a long position. They see the hidden asset.
That is the aha moment right there. I will never look at a fancy toilet the same way again. I'll just see a critical semiconductor component.
It's all connected in the plumbing.
So the broader strategy here is shorten the dollar. The report mentions an EPF for that, UDN. Buy a basket of non-U.S. dividend payers like the ETF, IDV, and then you buy commodity producers like BHP because copper demand is also surging for all this new infrastructure.
Precisely. It's a portfolio built for the physical reality of the AI build-out, not the marketing hype on a billboard.
Speaking of marketing hype, or maybe the destruction of it, let's talk about Section 3, weaponized reputation.
This is a much darker turn in the report, but it's essential for investors to understand.
The report calls it the hidden liability. It says reputational risk has fundamentally shifted from being, just a PR headache to being a full-blown existential risk.
We've seen this shift accelerate so much in the last few years. It used to be the CEO makes a mistake, the company issues an apology, maybe pays a fine, and the news cycle moves on.
Right.
Now, the market has absolutely zero tolerance. The report says we are in an era of retroactive adjudication.
Retroactive, meaning things you did 10 or 20 years ago matter just as much as what you did yesterday.
More in some cases. Look at the first case study the report uses, Hyatt Hotels.
All right, Thomas Pritzker.
He was a board member, part of the founding family. He left the board immediately. The press release said immediate departure. Why? Because of documents unsealed in a court case that linked him to Jeffrey Epstein.
And these were ties from a decade ago, right?
Yeah. The timeline doesn't matter anymore. That's the key insight. The market and the culture are re-adjudicating the past with today's standards. The association itself is toxic, regardless of when it happened.
It's a financial cancellation?
Yeah.
It directly impacts the stock.
It is. And for a public company, that is a massive, unquantifiable liability. If you have a board member or a CEO with a skeleton in the closet, that skeleton is now a ticking bomb. You don't know when it will go off, but if it does, the stock can get cut in half, or worse.
And it's not just about individuals. It's about entire brands. The report brings up the chaos at CBS and Paramount.
This is a fascinating slow-motion car crash that's happening right now. You have this storied brand, CBS News, 60 Minutes. For generations, that was the gold standard of American journalism.
And the report mentions Anderson Cooper is leaving the network.
It's a talent exodus. The report describes chaos under the new leadership. There are allegations of pressure to self-censor stories. The only thing a news organization sells is trust. That's it. They don't make widgets. They make trust.
And the source says that value is being dismantled in real time.
And that leads directly to the actionable trade. Short Paramount, the parent company. The stock ticker is PARA.
But wait a minute, there's all this M&A chatter about Paramount. People are trying to buy it. Usually that makes a stock go up. If I hear a company is a takeover target, my first instinct is to buy calls.
And that's the trap. The report calls all the M&A talk a smokescreen. It's distracting everyone from the fact that the core asset, the credibility of CBS, is imploding. If the credibility goes, the audience goes. If the audience goes, the advertising revenue goes. The value of the asset approaches zero.
So it's a value trap. It looks cheap on paper, but it's actually expensive because the earnings are about to evaporate.
Precisely. And the report connects this to the Adani case in India, which it calls the ultimate proof of this whole hidden liability thesis.
Remind us of that one.
It's the perfect parallel. Adani is this huge Indian conglomerate. A short seller, Hindenburg Research, released a massive report alleging fraud. The stock tanked. Adani denied everything. The stock recovered a bit. People thought, okay, the storm has been weathered.
But it wasn't over.
Not even close. The report highlights that just this week, a full year after the Hindenburg report, an internal memo from a big European bank in Intesa Sanpaolo was leaked. And it completely corroborated the short sellers' claims. It showed Adani associates were secretly holding billions of dollars in their own stock through offshore funds.
So the short seller was right all along.
The short seller was right. And the critical lesson here is these hidden liabilities have a very long half-life. They don't just go away. They sit there radioactive, just waiting to detonate.
Detonate without warning. That's the phrase from the report. So the advice is, if you smell smoke around a company's reputation, whether it's Hyatt or Paramount or Adani, don't wait for the fire. Just get out. Or if you're aggressive, go short.
Exactly. Reputation is now a fundamental financial metric. You have to price it in, just like you would price in debt or cash flow.
Okay, let's move on to Section 4. The Intelligence Bureau. This is where we get into what the report calls the second-order oracles.
I like this part. These are very specific stock situations based on single events. It's all about spotting the ripple effect. The if this, then that of the market.
Let's run through these rapid fire. Scenario A, the border friction play.
Okay, this one is coming out of the UK. The government just officially abandoned a £110 million project that was supposed to create a frictionless post-Brexit border.
So they just gave up. They admitted that a smooth border is impossible.
They gave up. They essentially admitted that trade friction, which means more paperwork, more delays, more customs checks, more stamps, is now a permanent feature of UK-EU trade.
That sounds terrible for business. It just slows everything down and adds cost.
It's bad for most businesses, but it's great for one specific kind of business, DSV.
DSV.co, the big Danish logistics giant.
Think about it. If moving goods across a border is super easy and frictionless, anyone can do it. A guy with a van can compete. Margins are low because competition is high.
Right, it's a commodity service.
But if moving a single truck requires 50 pages of customs declarations, specialized compliance software, and access to bonded warehouses, you need a specialist. Complexity is a billable service.
So the harder it is to trade, the more money a company like DSV makes.
And all the smaller competitors who can't handle the red tape, they get squeezed out of the market. DSV gains market share. It's a competitive moat built entirely out of bureaucracy.
That is classic second-order thinking. Bad news for the economy is actually good news for the company that fixes the problem. Okay, scenario B, the corporate split. This one involves Genuine Parts, ticker GPC.
Most people in the U.S. probably know them as Napa Auto Parts.
Yeah, the blue and yellow sign. I get my oil filters there.
Right. So they're splitting the company in two. They're separating the consumer auto parts business from their industrial business.
And the alpha, the opportunity here, is to buy GPC.
But not for the reason you think. The market loves the consumer brand, Napa, because we all recognize it. But the report argues that the real prize, the undervalued gem, is the industrial side of the business, which is a company called Motion.
Motion, what do they do?
They sell bearings, hydraulics, pneumatics, basically all the little essential parts that keep factories running. Now, remember our first segment, reshoring.
Factories coming back to America.
Yeah.
Infrastructure spending.
Exactly. All this infrastructure spending is ramping up. Who do you think supplies the bearings and the belts and the hoses for all those new factories and rebuilt bridges?
Motion.
The industrial segment is higher margin, and it's absolutely critical to the reindustrialization of America. But the market is undervaluing it right now because it's hidden inside this familiar auto parts company. Once it spins off into its own publicly traded stock, the report argues people will see the true value.
It's a sum of the parts trade, unlocking hidden value. Interesting. Okay, scenario C, the CBD collapse.
This one is a bit rough, actually.
I mean, we've seen CBD absolutely everywhere for the last few years. In gummies, oils, sodas, dog treats. The whole narrative was all natural, all safe, it cures anxiety, it cures pain.
That narrative is dying. The report cites new scientific research, specifically a preprint paper, that shows prenatal CBD exposure in mice has lasting sex-dependent neurodevelopmental consequences.
Yikes. That is not something you want to hear. Neurodevelopmental consequences.
No, that's a terrifying phrase. And the report predicts this is the kind of data that will trigger swift FDA action and a wave of litigation. The party's over.
So the trade is, what, just sell all the CBD stocks?
Well, the trade is actually to buy KVUE, Kenvue.
The Tylenol company.
Yeah.
The people who make Band-Aids. What's the connection?
Exactly. The big, boring consumer health giant. Why? Because regulation creates a moat. If the FDA cracks down on CBD, all the small, unregulated players, the ones selling gummies at the gas station, they get crushed. They can't afford the clinical trials or the massive compliance departments.
But a company like Kenvue can.
Kenvue lives for compliance and regulation. That's their entire business model. As the CBD sector is forced to medicalize, the big pharma-adjacent players will step in and capture the entire market. They will be the ones to sell the safe, FDA-approved, clinically tested version of CBD products.
So the collapse of the Wild West CBD market is actually the birth of the corporate CBD market.
Exactly. It's a story of consolidation driven by safety concerns.
Man, these are sharp takes. Okay, I really want to get to the science. Because if you think financial plumbing is complex, wait until we get to biological plumbing.
Section 5, Frontier Science.
The report calls these killer experiments. And I love that the source material that Manal Mehta is looking at by ARC's preprints. For our listeners, these are scientific papers that haven't even been peer-reviewed yet. This is stuff that hasn't hit the mainstream journals.
That's where the edge is. If you wait for the article in the New England Journal of Medicine, the stock has already moved, the opportunity is gone. You have to read the raw data as it's coming out of the lab.
Okay, topic 1, Alzheimer's. For 20 years, all we've heard about is amyloid plaques.
And billions of dollars have been wasted targeting them. The drugs that clear plaques, they don't really fix the memory loss in a meaningful way, so the report suggests a major pivot, and it's focused on something called the detectron.
The detectron. It sounds like a transformer.
It kind of does. It's actually an RNA to DNA biosensor. But to understand why it's so important, we have to talk about something called splicing.
Okay, give me the simple analogy. What is splicing?
Think of your DNA as the raw footage of a movie. It has every single scene that was shot. But to make the final movie, which is the protein, you have to go into the editing room, you cut out certain scenes, you paste others together. That editing process is splicing.
Okay, I follow that.
In some forms of Alzheimer's, the report identifies a problem called allele-specific splicing. Basically, the editor is drunk, they are making bad cuts, they are splicing the gene incorrectly, and that creates a broken protein that doesn't work right in the brain.
So the plaque isn't the real problem? The bad editing is the root cause of the problem.
Exactly. The plaque is the symptom, not the disease. So the killer experiment here is using these detectrons to screen hundreds of thousands of potential drug compounds. The detectron acts like a movie critic. It literally lights up, it fluoresces when it sees the correct splice being made.
So you just throw a bunch of different drugs at the cells, and if the detectron lights up and says, hey, the edit is fixed, you've basically found a cure.
You've found a drug that corrects the root cause of the disease. You're not just cleaning up the mess afterward, you're stopping the bad edit from ever happening. It connects allele-specific splicing to programmable RNA detection, a huge leap.
And the goal is a drug that fixes the splicing.
Right. And the potential buyers for a drug like that, Biogen, Roche, Pfizer, they are desperate for a new approach that actually works.
Incredible. Okay, topic 2, cancer. And something called the RAGE receptor.
RAGE, which is an appropriately aggressive name. It stands for Receptor for Advanced Glycation End Products.
That's a mouthful. RAGE works better.
It does. The basic science says this receptor fuels chronic inflammation. And we now know that chronic inflammation is like pouring gasoline on the fire for many types of cancer.
So if you can block the RAGE receptor, you can cut the fuel line to the tumor.
Theoretically, yes. But here's the nuance. This is the alpha unlock, as the report calls it. It's not just about blocking it, it's about how you block it. The report talks about a new type of screening called kinetic screening.
And the key metric is residence time.
Right. Most drug screening just checks, does it stick? Does the key fit into lock? This new experiment checks, how long does the key stay in the lock?
You don't want a key that just pops right back out. You want a drug that parks in the spot and refuses to leave.
Exactly. You want a high residence time. If you can find a small molecule that binds to RAGE and stays there for hours or even days, you have what the report calls a pipeline in a pill. You could potentially treat pancreatic cancer, lung cancer, anything that's driven by this inflammation pathway.
And a drug like that would be worth
over $10 billion, easily. A company like Merck or Gilead would pay a fortune for that asset.
Okay, last one in the science section, osteoporosis. weak bones.
This one is fascinating because it talks about a potential cure, not just a chronic treatment.
A one-time cure.
Right. The current drugs, like Prolia, you have to take them forever. And they have some nasty potential side effects: jaw necrosis, atypical fractures. This new approach uses something called CRISPR.
CRISPR, that's the gene editing tool.
Usually, CRISPR is used like a pair of scissors to cut out a bad gene. CRISPR, the A stands for activation, is different. It's like a volume knob. It doesn't cut anything. It just turns a specific gene on and cranks up the volume.
And which gene are we turning on for this?
A gene called DAP3. The report calls it the master regulator of bone formation.
So you would get an injection of this therapy, it goes to your bone cells, turns up the volume on the BAP3 gene, and your body just starts building more bone.
It remineralizes the bone from the inside out. It could potentially reverse the aging process of the skeleton.
That would completely wipe out the current multi-billion-dollar market for osteoporosis treatments.
It would completely disrupt it. It's a moonshot for sure, but the genetic validation is there, and that's the first step.
It's just amazing to think that these papers are sitting there right now on a preprint server, just waiting for someone to connect the dots to a financial market.
That's the job. That's why we read the preprints.
Okay, let's get back to the stock market. The high conviction contrarian list. This is section 6. The lightning round. These are stocks that, for the most part, everyone hates.
These are the ugly ducklings of the market.
First up, Angie I. Angie Inc.
The home services company, the app you use to find a plumber or an electrician.
The report literally quotes a source calling it a structurally broken turd.
You don't see that kind of language in a Goldman Sachs report.
No, you do not. So why on earth does Manal P like it?
Deep, deep value. The market has basically priced it for bankruptcy. But the source sees a turnaround story. They argue that a 2x return, a doubling of the stock, only requires stabilization.
So it doesn't have to become a great company. It just has to stop being a total disaster.
Exactly. A few modest AI improvements in their margins, better algorithms for matching pros with customers, that stabilizes the revenue, and the stock doubles. It's a pure math play on low expectations.
Okay. Next up, GPRK. Geopark.
Latin American energy producer.
The market looks at this and sees Argentina risk, Colombia risk. They see hyperinflation and political instability, and they just run away.
But the source sees production tripling by 2028. They have secured financing. They have assets in the Vaca Muerta, which is one of the best shale formations in the world. The argument is simple. The oil doesn't care about the politics. If they can get it out of the ground, the cash flow is undeniable.
Next, SGMO. Sangamo, we were just talking about gene editing.
This is what the report calls a binary biotech.
Enterprise value of $0.13 billion. That basically means the market thinks the company and its technology are worth almost nothing.
Pretty much zero. But they have a therapy for Fabry disease. It's called ST920 that is ready for a big phase 3 trial. The source says the data so far suggests it's best in class.
So if they sign a partnership deal with a big pharma company,
the stock re-rates massively. It's a multi-fold return. If they don't get a deal,
it goes to zero.
That's the binary risk, all or nothing. But the report argues the asset is too good to let die on the vine. Someone will likely step in.
And finally, the wild one. The Puerto Rico gamble. MBI.
MBIA Inc.
This is a bond insurance company wrapped in a legal and political nightmare.
It's a pure play on the Puerto Rico Oversight Board. The entire value of the company is dependent on a series of Supreme Court rulings regarding a massive debt restructuring.
The report calls it a call option on SCOTUS.
It is extremely high risk. But if the legal rulings go their way, the payout is huge and asymmetric. The market hates it because it's incredibly complex and political. The source loves it for the exact same reasons.
Because nobody else is willing to do the homework to figure it out.
Exactly. Complexity is where you find opportunity.
All right, let's zoom out for the last section here. The Global Intelligence Log, Section 7. These are the news briefs, the little signals flashing on the dashboard.
The broader context for the week.
First up, media wars. We mentioned Paramount earlier. There's now a 7-day window.
Yeah, Warner Bros. Discovery, or WBD versus Paramount. The report says WBD has opened a 7-day window for a best and final offer to acquire Paramount.
It sounds like a hostage negotiation or something.
It's high-stakes poker. The winner gets the prize, which is scale. They desperately need scale to fight Netflix and Disney. But they also get a mountain of debt.
The winner's curse.
Could be. And the loser. The loser is left vulnerable and subscale. If Paramount turns this deal down and no one else comes along, they are in deep trouble. If WBD walks away, they are still too small. It's a really dangerous game for both of them.
Next signal, MedTech consolidation. The big company Danaher is buying Massimo.
For $10 billion. This is a classic Danaher move. Danaher is famous for the Danaher business system. They are sort of like the Marie Kondo of corporations. They buy good but messy companies, and they make them ruthlessly efficient.
And Massimo makes the pulse oximeters, right? The little clip they put on your finger in the hospital.
Right. And they had all this public drama with Apple over patents, and activist investors were involved. Danaher is swooping in, buying a best-in-class asset to improve the margins. It's a clear signal that the medtech space is consolidating.
Third signal, defense tech. The Pentagon needs counter-drone sensors, and the report says they need them now.
This is a direct response to what we're seeing in Ukraine and in the Red Sea. Cheap, off-the-shelf drones are changing the face of warfare. And the Pentagon is finally realizing that billion-dollar missiles are not a cost-effective answer to a $500 drone.
You need a cheaper way to spot them and take them down.
You need sensors everywhere. And you need them fast. The report calls this a structural shift in defense spending. It's not a one-time purchase. Force protection for every base, every ship, now requires counter-drone tech. It's a whole new budget line item.
And finally, the oops moment. Figure Technologies.
A fintech lender. They got breached. A data breach.
But not by some super hacker in a foreign country.
No, it was social engineering. Someone just tricked an employee into giving them access.
It's such a good reminder, isn't it? We talk about AI and quantum computing and splicing genes, but the biggest risk in the system
Is usually a human being clicking a link they shouldn't have clicked.
human error. It's still the biggest risk in fintech.
And that really brings us full circle, in a way.
It does. Wow. We have covered a lot of ground today.
We certainly have.
Let's try to synthesize this whole thing. What's the one big takeaway? We started with the Fed basically trapping the dollar,
Right, sanctioning a weak currency to fight the inflation that's coming from deglobalization.
which leads us to buy foreign stocks and Canadian oil.
Then we looked at AI. The hype is the billboard on the highway. The real value is in the plumbing.
The Toto toilet. The ceramic chuck in the factory.
We saw how reputation has become a weapon, and why you should be shorting companies like Paramount, where the core asset of trust is gone.
And we went into the lab and saw the future of medicine. Not just managing decline, but actually fixing the biological edit, splicing the gene correctly.
And the common thread through all of it, I think, is the plumbing.
Say more about that. What do you mean?
In every single one of these sections, the alpha, the excess return, the opportunity, was found in the machinery underneath the surface. It wasn't in the headline GDP number, it was in the currency flows that the number creates.
It wasn't in the fancy AI software.
It was in the factory ceramics that make the chips for the software. It wasn't in the brand name of the drug, it was in the splicing mechanism in the cell.
So it's all about looking at how the system actually works, not how it's advertised to us.
Precisely. The market is messy. It's efficient in the very, very long run, maybe. But in the short run, it's full of billboards and hype and noise.
So here's the final provocative thought for our listeners to take with them.
The second-order oracle.
Right. We live in a world where insider billboards are on the highway. We live in a world where 7% economic growth brings talk of rate cuts. It feels completely upside down.
It feels like all the old rules are broken.
So ask yourself, are you looking at the headline? Are you looking at the all-safe CBD label on the bottle? Or are you looking at the plumbing?
Because if you're looking at the headline, you're the liquidity. You're the one being sold to.
But if you're looking at the plumbing,
Then you're the one finding the invisible narrative.
and that is where the deep dive takes you. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Stay curious.